Welcome back and thanks for still being there. Of course, this is our interview segment where we're being joined by a resource person to look into certain issues happening in the country, top of which is going to be the 2024 budget presented by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, estimated at 27.5 trillion naira. Of course, we're going to be looking at the breakdown of the budget into different sectors and how it's going to be in favor whilst we wait for the National Assembly to also argue the cause with the committees that will be heading to the National Assembly. Also, part of a conversation this morning is 2024 is already here. Conversations about the review of the minimum wage is already being heightened. And the big question is how much will public sector wage increase be in 2024? We also see here this week being a week where we're observing, conversations around gender-based violence. The Attorney General of the Federation has said that there is going to be a development of legal procedures for prosecution of perpetrators of gender-based violence in schools. There to have this conversation with us this morning is Marvel Asien, who is a human resource development expert and organizational development consultant. Good morning. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning, Oyai.
Well, it's a big morning to talk tough with Nigeria. We have the 2024 budget on the table, being the most topical thing that we're looking at this morning. The president has presented the budget. It's time for it to be broken down. In the overall, we are first of all looking 27.5 trillion naira as budget estimate for the whole of 2024 is what the president has, put on the table, plus some other borrowings that he still intends to do in addition to that. Before we go into the sectoral conversation about this particular budget, in the overall, in the presentation of the president, what do you think about this particular budget? There's already argument by the People's Democratic Party that this is a really is a budget that lacks hope. They're already attacking it, but then we also have people that are saying that this is a forward-thinking budget.
Yes, if you ask me, I would score the president above average on the presentation of that budget. But I wouldn't just stop there. I would tell you that there are some contradictions in the budget anyway, but we are going to look at what brings about these contradictions that we are finding in the budget, and why would the president contradict himself? Recently, the president has said that he would give over 10% of the total budget to the health sector. But what we are seeing, as at this morning, I just saw a breakdown that indicates that what is going to the health ministry is less than 5%, about 4-point-something% to the health ministry. And the hopes that we had that is going to address issues regarding education is not encouraging at all, because he's allocating about 7% of the total budget to education. And given the hopes that we had that the president would understand what education means to the economy of a nation, it's quite disheartening to find that what he's allocating to education is so low for that sector. Now, we look at it from this aspect again, that the 2023 budget was based on an exchange value of about 450 naira per dollar. This is based on about 750 naira per dollar. So when you look at it, he said there's a 26% increase in the budget. Of course, you see that it's a ruse. It's not something that we can really say there is an increase. If you budgeted, let me bring it down to maybe 2 naira or 10 naira last year for a budget at the rate of maybe 10 naira to $1. Now today, 20 naira is equal to $1. So, and you budget the same value of dollar. It doesn't indicate any increase in the budget. It doesn't also tell us that the presidency is serious about doing things in the education sector. But when you look at other aspects, like his focused discussion on the macroeconomics level, that's I'm talking about inflation rate, targeting inflation rate, discussing things about the interest rate and the CBN efforts in this direction so far, you will find that, of course, the budget, you can score them higher in that area, because it's likely that they are going to manage this from what we have been hearing from the CBN. So from the macroeconomics level, it's all well and good. But when you come to the micro level, that has to do with businesses and individuals, what we are having is not something that is very, very encouraging. So we just wonder how the presidency would manage to meet up with these issues if the budget stands as it is today. I would say I score the president high in terms of maybe the exchange rate, in terms of the hopes that we are going to stabilize the exchange rate. Given what they have done already with the backlog that they have paid, given the hopes that the loan that they are getting from the World Bank and the African Development Bank in dollars would also help our foreign exchange in Nigeria. Given all that, we may say, okay, the budget is likely going to do well. Then the issue on taxation, the president said he wants to increase taxes, that he would like to have higher value from internally generated revenue. When you look at that too, you begin to wonder, where is this tax going to come from if you are going to address the issue of multiple taxation?
Exactly.
And yet you want to, you are telling us that you are going to move taxes up.
Exactly.
To be fair to the president, it is possible to move taxes up without really finding it as a burden on the people if the micro level is all well and good. Micro level in terms of individual businesses, individuals and the businesses. If you grow people's businesses, if you put infrastructures in place to grow businesses, you are likely going to have a better economy, and people are really going to pay more taxes. But before that happens, can all this happen in 2024? We have a lot of infrastructural deficit already. So if you're having this deficit already, in terms of infrastructural deficit already, then you are going to use about a year or more to put things in place. So how are we going to have this income from taxes from January 2024 to use in supporting the 2024 budget? Another area of concern is our major revenue to handle this budget comes from crude oil. And we are putting crude oil at about 70, is it 78 or 79 dollar per barrel? And the other part of it is our generation value of 1.7, about 1.7. If, for example, we have not been able, OPEC had given us 2 million barrels per day for production, and we have not been able to meet up OPEC's standard. What happens if OPEC decides to drop our quota to maybe 1.2, 1.3, 1.4? It means a direct deficit on the budget that we are going to fall short of the budgetary expectations. From the macro level, his focus, his address, speaking about his focus on children, education and all that is fine. But the practical part of it, the allocation, what is coming to education is not good enough. What is coming to healthcare is not good enough. If we want to relate healthcare and education to how an economy should run, we would also know that these are critical areas. If people in the country, if you have a lot of people that are not healthy, if you're not paying attention to health in a country, then you cannot boast of productivity. You cannot say that you are going to heighten productivity in that nation. He has high hopes. He has created a beautiful budget in terms of concept of the budget. But in terms of real issues of addressing the allocations to this budget, I don't think that has gone very well in this his budget presentation.
Okay. We also see the fact that the president is targeting public-private investments to finance infrastructure. So he's looking at how the public-private sectors can come in with the federal government to work together to help bolster this particular budget for 2024. Where is the place of the private sector in all of this? Do you think that they have what it takes? And do you think that the federal government has what it takes to foster a merger between these two sectors?
If you look at it, the public-private partnership would have to do with how well our economy is doing. If the federal government is saying that it's a beautiful idea. Of course, that's the way to go, that you bring in the private, public-private partnership would ensure more transparency and accountability in everything that we are doing in our country. But on the other hand, where is the finance going to come from? The value of the naira has dropped so tremendously. Businesses are suffering. I think last week or so, the CBN spoke about recapitalization of the banks.
Yeah.
Beautiful idea to recapitalize the banks. But you may have the outshoot of it being job cuts in the market, because technology have taken over a lot of things in the bank. And you would also observe that if that happens within the banking sector, that it would help a lot to give, in terms of credit facility, in terms of helping the economy, in terms of credit facility and all that. But you see, when this is as this is happening, the banks need to go to the stock exchange to source capital, to source for capital. This recapitalization, you have to go to the stock exchange to source it. The players, the shareholders, are Nigerians. Our stock market is still very localized. It's a domestic market that you need to depend on partnerships from within Nigeria to execute these plans. Where are they going to take money from? When I'm saying where are they going to take money from is in the concept of our exchange rate. The exchange rate has made businesses, has affected profits of businesses tremendously. So how are they going to survive? So you have very few partners in terms of the big players in Nigeria having roles to play within this public-private partnership. You talk about, if you want to talk about a refinery, you know the capital cost that is that it will take. If you talk about the road building of roads, you know the capital, how capital intensive these are. You have very few players that are going to do this. But if we are talking about public-private partnership and also open up our economy to the international world, if we have a way of managing the capital flight that may come with that concept as well, if we have a way of managing capital flight in that concept, then we can open up our economy to international, to the international society in a manner that people are able to come in from the international community to invest in the Nigeria, in the Nigeria economy, in a manner that we are able to see how we can attract foreign investments. So we have foreign players in our Nigeria stock exchange. We could also have foreign players coming into our banking sector, or our local banks even playing subsidiary roles to big banks in the international community.
But is this public-private partnership, is it going to be in addition to the taxes that these private organizations are already paying? Or are there other incentives that the federal government is going to give them to leverage on to be able to make these kinds of investments? Because tax is one way that the private sector is contributing to the GDP of the country. If you're saying that you want them to work as seriously in tandem with the federal government with regards to this particular budget, what are the incentives available for the private sector to be able to take on this responsibility?
There are many incentives, like you've rightly said. Tax is one of the things. If you have a tax waiver for organizations, for companies, for conglomerates, of course, for them to partner with government, it includes the fact that there must be some kind of level of incentives and tax waivers for them to do so. Our concern is the capitalization, how capital intensive these projects that you expect private people to partner with are going to be. There are low-hanging fruits in the capital, in these projects that people can just tap into. Last week we heard about the failure of the Abuja Film Village, that they have to lay off staff. Now that's a tourist center, that's a film village. The concept of it would have been to generate revenue. But you find out that they cannot even pay salaries because it is not well run, because it is in government hands. If this was in a private hand, it would have been better done. So the idea of a public-private partnership is a beautiful idea. It's a nice idea. It's something that should be encouraged for our country. But the other side of it is the devaluation, the effect of the devaluation of the naira, that's my concern. That's what I'm looking at, that what can they really do when we have this private? We need to do things in the economy to strengthen this area. And one of those things is for us to work on the interest rate that we are having currently, is for us to check our inflation rate, is for us to stabilize the exchange rate in a manner that people, investors, can work in a predictable manner. So you could say, this in February, this is what I'm going to see. In June, this is what I'm going to see. In December, this is what I'm going to see. When once an economy becomes predictable in that manner, then the public-private partnership issue can be easily done, and it would be very, very profitable to the country.
So let's look at sectoral allocation of what the budget of 27.5 trillion naira as given by the president is. Where are these monies going to? We see that defense is going to be gulping 3.25 trillion naira. Education, as opposed to what, Marvel SN is saying this morning, that was supposed to get a 10% increase.
More than 10%.
More than
should
10,
be 10%. He even promised 10% for the health.
So we see education is getting 2.18 trillion naira. Excuse me. Infrastructure is to gulf 1.32 trillion naira. Health sector is getting 1.3 trillion naira. Social development and poverty reduction is getting 534 billion naira. We also see recurrent spending at 9.92 trillion naira. Recurrent spending, Marvel Bassi, 9.92 trillion naira. We're going to come to that. We also see capital expenditure standing at 8.7 trillion naira. Debt servicing is gulping 8.25 trillion naira. Of course, we see that 45% of the expected revenue has been projected for debt servicing. So half of what we're currently fighting for is money to pay back debt, of which the president is still saying he wants to borrow some monies still in this particular presentation. Now, key indices that we see with regards to this budget, 750 naira to a dollar is one of the indices that is used to calculate this. We also see that 77.96 dollars per barrel is how we're going to be selling crude. We also see 1.78 million barrels per day is the expectation of outturn for crude in the country. The economy is expected to grow by 3.76%. And then inflation reduction expectation 21.4%. These are the indices and the allocation that we have. But when you're talking about having 9.92 trillion naira on recurrent spending, remember that as part of recurrent expenditure is the monies that the federal government wastes, and that is gulping the highest on the budget.
That's a big concern, and that has to do with the fact that the presidency takes so much money, the Senate takes so much money in terms of running the government. Just a little, maybe going to the other aspect of the Nigerian economy. Now, that is an area that the presidency itself should set an example by reducing its own expenses and maybe advising the National Assembly to follow suit to do the same. Now, recurrent expenditures as we are having presently, you see an example in the mindset of the people running government when the Federal Capital Territory Minister is saying that he's going to put about 15 billion naira to the renovation of the Vice President's residence in the Aso Villa. Now, when such an amount is carved out for a project like that, when we have other areas that we should be investing for, so you wonder if they are not going to even be touching monies relating to the loans they are taking on consumption instead of investment. So when you look at the lifestyle, when you look at the body language of people in government, it makes one to lose confidence in most of these issues that they raise, that they want to make this happen, they want to make that happen, and yet your body language is saying something very, very different. And factually, as it is seen, that you are not giving priority to areas of the economy that priority should be given to. Key in that area is education. I know security has been given, I've forgotten what is going to security. Security is very, very important, because without security, of course, other aspects of the economy cannot run the way it should run. security is one aspect that is very, very important in an economy of a nation. The presidency has promised an overhaul of the entire security infrastructure. How much is allocated for that is another story completely. I don't know how much is allocated. I'm not sure.
When we are talking about an overhaul of the security, does that include the fact that once he came into office, he already overhauled the leadership of, you know, the defense entirely? When you're overhauling, what indices is the president hoping to look into? Because these are major issues.
My understanding is that apart from the human resources, you also have the infrastructure, the security infrastructures. So if you see that the technology that they are using is not adequate, of course you can introduce fresh and new technologies. And if you want to make overhaul the human resources part of it, you can maybe take out the military, for example, from a certain area and say, okay, police should replace the ministry and on all that. But on the whole, if it's talking about overhauling security infrastructure, as they would say, that security is not something to be discussed publicly, then on the Minister of Defense, the security ministry should know exactly what they want to do in that regard. But however they want to go about it, all what the citizens of Nigeria would like to see is results. Let us be able to travel on land from Akwa Ibom to Kano, from Sokoto to Maiduguri. Let us be able to use our roads without this issue of kidnapping, without this issue of armed robbery and other security challenges that we are currently facing in the country. Let them position Nigeria in security-wise, that people can relatively have peace in moving around and freely move around to do their businesses in Nigeria. That's the contribution that we expect the government to make for us to be able to thrive as a developing economy.
Well, that's so much conversation we can take with regards to the budget this morning. Of course, further breakdown is expected as we hope to hear what the committee set up by the National Assembly to look into these various allocations are going to come. Remember that the heads of these different sectors would have to come and defend the allocations given to them. The likes of Ali Party would have to argue why the health sector hasn't gotten so much more in terms of allocation. The head of the which other sector now, education sector, would have to come and argue why, you know, they're not getting a lot more funds. It's still a lot to unpack with regards to the budget, but this is where we're going to leave this particular conversation and draw it close to it. There's a lot of issues to look at. If I can just take you 1 minute on, we have the conversation about salary increase for 2024. That conversation is on the rise. With all of the indices in this day, 2024 is when they can generally increase the minimum wage. What are the expectations? The big question is, what are workers going to be earning in 2024 as increase?
When you ask me that question, you know, I'm going to answer you as a professional. I mean, as an organizational development professional. Exactly. Salaries are investments. Salaries are investments. So you cannot just look at salary as a given or a takeaway or a dash. So once you understand that salary is an investment, then you will begin to understand how it should be accounted for. Okay. That if you are requesting or demanding, or you are asking a particular amount to be paid to you, you should have to associate it with the value that would come from that payment. But are we there? This is a big conversation that I don't think we have time to go into this morning. Because when you want to discuss this, you would want to take up the key performance indicators of people in government, each ministry, what are you contributing to the economy? So what should be paid should be commensurate with your contribution to the economy.
As a sector.
If you are not doing so, then you are not where to be found. But the other part to it, which people may be very familiar with, is the issue of inflation. Okay. That people will be looking at it as per what value of Naira did we have last year, what is the value of this year. That's the one people will be very familiar with. Okay. And to speak on that, we had inflation rise to 27%. The projected budget says they are going to bring it down to 21%. Yeah. That's quite ambitious, though. If they are able to do that, fine. So if you are going to look at it, you are going to look at it in terms of the cost of living indices. Right. against the inflation rate.
So I think what we'll do is we'll probably have you tomorrow virtually. We'll just call you in and let's have some time to talk about this, because 2024 is already here and this is the best time to lay the bedrock for these kinds of conversation. And like you said, it's a holistic conversation that we need to have.
Yeah.
But we have to thank you very much, Marvelous, and of course, HR consult and organization development expert. So like Nigeria and the Welfare of Nigerians being an organization, he'll be talking to us about this particular issue tomorrow. But this is the much we can take on Rise and Shine. Thank you for being a part of this. Until tomorrow, where we return with more information for you. Stay glued to Spectrum Television. My name is Uyai Anyekan. Enjoy the rest of your day.